I told him I was not in love with him. He nodded and said thanks for being honest. By morning, the flowers, the surprises, the affection, all vanished. So did my smile. My name is Lydia, I am 28, and I had been with Ethan, 30, for 2.5 years. We had been living together in his downtown apartment for the past year. Everything seemed normal until one Sunday night when I realized I needed to have an honest conversation about our relationship. We had just finished dinner, some Thai takeout we had shared while watching Netflix. I had been quiet all evening, which was normal, but my energy felt different that night. Finally, I muted the TV and turned to face him on the couch. I said, Ethan, I need to tell you something, and I want you to know it is coming from a place of love and respect. He set down his beer and asked what was going on. I took a deep breath and told him I had been thinking a lot about us and where we were headed. I told him I saw our friends getting engaged and talking about marriage and realized that I needed to be completely honest about my feelings. My stomach dropped a little as I tried to find the right words. I told him I cared about him so much and that he was my best friend and my partner, but Ethan, I am not in love with him. I love him as a person deeply, but I am not in love with him. I asked him if that made sense, and I watched him process my words as they hung in the air like a confession that changed everything. He asked me if I wanted to break up. I told him no, that was not what it was about at all. I told him I loved our life together, that he made me laugh, that he was reliable, and that we had something good. I wanted him to know the truth about the romantic feelings part instead of me pretending. He nodded slowly and thanked me for being honest. I looked relieved because I had been carrying this weight for months. He told me he was not upset and that he would rather know how I really felt than live in a fantasy. We went to bed that night like normal. I curled up next to him while he stared at the ceiling thinking about what I had said. The next morning, everything changed for him. He got up first and went through his routine. He did not wake me with a kiss or tell me he loved me before leaving for work. Instead, he left a note on the counter. By Monday, I noticed he had cancelled the weekly flower delivery he had been sending to my office. $20 worth of flowers each week that had brightened my day were gone, and I felt strangely unsettled. Throughout the day, I noticed him stopping himself from sending texts, little notes, or photos he would normally send me. He was adjusting his behavior because I was no longer his girlfriend in the way he had acted before. That evening, I was cooking dinner when he walked in. I smiled expecting a kiss, but he gave me a friendly hug instead. I handed him a glass of wine and asked how his day was. He replied fine and sat at the kitchen counter instead of wrapping his arms around me like he usually did. I filled the silence with stories about my day while he listened politely. After dinner, we went to the living room, and he sat in the armchair across from the couch. I asked why he was sitting there, and he said he just wanted a change of pace. I watched him, confused, but he did not push further. We watched a few episodes of our show, and when he finally went to bed, he left me alone without the usual goodnight kiss. On Tuesday, I expected things to return to normal. I walked into the kitchen in my t-shirt expecting morning affection, but he handed me my coffee with a smile and no more. I asked him if that was it, and he left for work. That afternoon, I watched him go through the apartment and gather all the gifts he had bought me over the months. Books, shirts, and journals, all packed into a box. When I asked what he was doing, he explained that romantic gestures were for romantic relationships and that since we were no longer in love, it felt inappropriate to keep them. I struggled for words, realizing he was treating me as a friend, not a girlfriend. Wednesday was date night, but Ethan invited friends to join us. I froze when he mentioned our friends Tom and Amy. He explained that friends have dinner together, and since we were friends now, it was appropriate to split the check. I felt hurt and confused. Everything seemed strange and cold. I was realizing how much I had taken for granted the romantic gestures that were no longer being performed. Thursday, I came home stressed from work. Normally, Ethan would have gone into full boyfriend mode. This time, he listened politely while I vented and offered simple advice. I wanted more, but he reminded me that we were now friends and that my emotional regulation was my responsibility. Friday came, and I noticed the flowers were not delivered. I tried to understand why, but he explained they were for a girlfriend, and I was no longer that. We argued about what being together meant and realized we were living in a strange in-between state. Saturday, I tried to recreate our old dynamic. I made blueberry pancakes, wore his favorite t-shirt, and suggested we go to the farmer's market. He asked if I wanted to make it a group outing, reminding me that we were friends now. I felt hurt, realizing he was being appropriate but distant. I confronted him in the car that night, crying, asking what was wrong. He told me he was acting as a friend, which is what I said I wanted, but it was not enough for me. I wanted to feel the love, even if it was not real on my end. By Sunday night, I admitted to him I had made a mistake. I had read an article online suggesting that to test if someone truly loved you, you should create emotional distance. I confessed I wanted to see if he would fight for me, and I realized now how cruel it had been. He told me it was not stupid, it was cruel, and asked if I could forgive him. I could not say. I only knew I wanted to start over, but he asked me how he could trust me to never test him again. I promised I would not. By the following Saturday, I spent the day packing. I told him I needed someone who wanted to love me, not someone who needed to be loved by me. We both cried, realizing that we loved differently. I moved in temporarily with my friend Chloe, and I left Ethan's apartment. It felt strange and final, yet somehow right. For the first time, Ethan lived without anxiety, without walking on eggshells, and without needing to prove himself. He called friends, pursued hobbies he loved, and finally realized how much he had invested in someone who could not reciprocate in the same way. Weeks later, he met someone new. Her name is Clara, and she loves him completely. She does not need tests. She does not manipulate or demand proofs. She just loves him the way he deserves. I texted him weeks after leaving. I asked if he ever thought about getting back together, but he did not respond immediately. He realized he deserved someone sure about him, someone who loved him authentically. Some people want to be loved. Others want to love. The lucky ones find both. Ethan found lucky, and I learned the hard way what it truly meant to love someone without selfishness or games. Dear viewers, tell me in the comments, would you have handled a situation like this differently? Remember to like, share, turn on notifications, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.